Now, I know that people like to make up trades, and it's like, hey, but Brad Miller, somebody texted in, Brad Miller's a veteran who hit 30 homers in the past. Brad Miller and another player and a pick for a closer. You can't trade picks in baseball. That's number one. Number two, no one's giving you a closer for Brad Miller because he hit 30 home runs with the Rays a couple of years ago. I hate to break it to you. Mike McGarry from the Press of Atlantic City, I don't know. Baseball trades are an interesting thing. It's like, hey, this guy's having a good year, so try to trade him. That's not really how this works, right? Like, Gene Segura is having a great year. You're not getting anything of value for him that's going to change your franchise. Like, it's not going to deepen your minor league system by trading the McCutchens and the Gene Seguras to the Didi Gregoriuses of the world. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're right. I think if you trade veterans like that at the best, you're going to get back a prospect who is in A-ball right now. You're not trading Gene Segura or Andrew McCutchen for a AAA player who's going to come into your lineup next year and play a position for the next 5 to 6 years. So you're right about that when you trade some veterans. I do think, however, that the Phillies, I'm a guy who thinks the Phillies should sell. And what I mean by that is I think they should look at breaking up the core of their team, because I do think they do have some players who are valuable in that core who can possibly bring back something.
Well, I agree. Like, if you say, should the Phillies be buyers or sellers? They're 4 back right now, all right? Is this team good enough? No, their bullpen's not very good. They don't play very good defense. The problem is selling, you're just selling just to break up the core, not to restock.
Well, I'd be selling because I think, what we've seen for 3.5 years is what we have now. And that is a team that is basically around 500, that hangs on the periphery of the playoff race, and every once in a while teases us the way they're teasing us this week. They look like the 1927 Yankees out there against the reeling Chicago Cubs, right? And everybody can get excited, take 2 of 3 from the Pirates, from the Padres rather, take the first 2 in Chicago. Hey, it's 4 of the last 5 lineups back together, double-digit runs, away we go. I think this is just another tease. I think they have long-term questions that cannot be answered. At best right now, if the Phillies stay the same right now, to me, what they're hoping for is, you hope that Bryce Harper has a year like he had in 2015, and you hope that everybody else has a career year, and then you're the 1993 Phils, and you make a run like that. Yeah. But that had no staying power. So if you want staying power, I think you've got to break up the core of the team.
Yeah, no, I look, in a perfect world, I agree. The problem is, it's hard to say to Bryce Harper, JT Realmuto, who you just signed to these big contracts, hey, we're going to strip. I think they're in an unenviable task here of, we've signed these 2 guys, so we can't go down to the bottom. So they try to fix this thing on the fly. They just don't have the pieces. Buster Olney suggested today that they should listen on calls for Zach Wheeler. Is he a guy that they should consider trading?
I listen. When I talk about the core of the team, I think that the players that have the most value on the core of the team would be the starting pitchers. If I was them, I'd listen on all 3 pitchers, Nola, Eflin, and Wheeler. And let's face facts, Zach Wheeler's value is never going to be higher than it is right now. He is arguably the best pitcher in the National League. I know people talk about Jacob deGrom, who, by the way, just gave up a home run about 20 minutes ago. But if you look at their Junes, since June 1st, I think Zach Wheeler had allowed 5 earned runs in like 39 innings. DeGrom had allowed 5 earned runs in 34 innings. So Wheeler has been better than DeGrom since June 1st. He's been more durable. His value is never going to be higher than it right now. So if you really want to try to turn this around quick, and you're exactly right, they're in a spot where they can't go on like a 5-year rebuilding program, right? Because of Realmuto, because of Harper. And you couldn't even trade those guys if you wanted to, with Harper's contract and probably Realmuto's also. So the guys you would have to flip and do it quickly, where maybe you take a mini step backwards in 2022, but then you're ready to reload in 2023, would be those 3 starting pitchers.
Yeah, I agree with the fact that, yes, Wheeler gets you the most back in return. Nola would be next, and obviously Eflin would get you a little bit lower. the Harper thing, you can't trade him. You can't trade JT Realmuto. Hoskins would be the position player that would likely get you the biggest return. The problem the Phillies have is the rest of their position players are older guys who aren't going to get you much back. So that's where they're kind of in this limbo thing where, all right, if we trade these pitchers, we're still stuck with this older core in the lineup.
Right.
So they're kind of like in a no-win situation.
Yeah, well, here's if you trade, this is why if you try to tweak around the edges, right? If you don't go all the way in, if you trade McCutchen and trade Segura, you're not solving any of your long-term issues, which they have long-term. They have a long-term issue at first base. They have a long-term issue at third base. They have a long-term issue in left field. They have a long-term issue in center field. Who's playing those positions 3 years from now, 4 years from now? No idea, basically. So that's the issue. So I think if you are going to sell, you really have to sell, because to sell Andrew McCutchen or Gene Segura, that's not solving anything. You might as well keep those guys and hope that you get hot the second half of the season and you can become the 93 Phils.
Well, right, Mike, they're trying to serve two masters here. They're trying to, that's why earlier I said, hey, look, you're playing the Cubs. If you sweep the Cubs, you've put the Cubs completely out. I mean, they'd be like 11 games out if they lose this series, if they get swept. That's when the Phillies might say, hey, you've got a 33-year-old closer. That would help us in the immediacy. The problem is the Phillies don't have anything to give up to get a player like that. Because if you're getting a Kimbrel, they're going to want something of value. And the Phillies don't have a young player of value to make that type of move. That's another problem they have. So they can't fix – if they just say – we want to make the playoffs this year through hell or high water. We don't care if we get knocked out in the wild card. We just want. Well, they're not going to be the wild card team. They're way out of that. If we want to win this division
or bust.
Right. If we want to win this division, we got to go for it. Let's get a closer. If they don't blow 22 saves, they'd be up in the division by 10 games already. So do they just say, let's go out and get a closer and see if we in the second half we can overtake the Mets?
Well, you're absolutely right in the fact that they don't have anything to offer out of their minor leagues. The one weapon they do have is money, right? So they could say to a team like the Cubs and say, look, you don't want to pay, you're out of it. You don't want to pay Craig Kimbrel whatever he's making the rest of the season. We'll take that $8, $9, $10 million off your hands. That's where they can add payroll. That's where they can make a move. Because you're right, they don't have any minor. People talk about buyers or sellers. They don't have anything to buy with player-wise. They don't have any prospects in the minor leagues that they can afford to trade away. So their one place where they're strong is they can say, hey, you got this overpaid guy. You're out of it. You don't want him anymore. We'll take that on. But again, look, a lot of people talk, and this could be famous last words, come back and bite me here, but 4.5 games, people talk like that's a pretty substantial lead for baseball. I mean, think about, the Phillies have won, 4 of the last 5. They haven't really picked up any ground on the Mets, who have won 3 of their last 4. You're 4.5, 5 back. Not every year is 2007 where you're 7 back with 17 to play and the Mets collapse. So you got to be somewhat realistic about this also.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I agree that like as you mentioned, and I said the other day, you're not making the wild card. You're not catching San Diego or the Dodgers. You're out of that. You've got to win the division. You got to figure out a way to catch the Mets. The Mets are going to make a move. Would you agree with that? That's going to improve their team.
Yes, I would agree that the Mets would make a move to bolster their starting pitching. And also, people got to remember, too, is the Mets have hardly played because of the way their schedule just unfolded. They had a lot of postponements. Remember, in the beginning of the year, they had that COVID thing with the Nationals. The Mets have only played 36, 37 home games. They've got a lot of home games left to play, and the schedule is kind of favorable for them. I know they finish up the first half with the Pirates and then start the second half with the Pirates. So, they've got a lot of factors in there sort of favor the Mets. So, you hear the Phillies say one good week this, one good week that. Yeah, I guess anything's possible in baseball. The Phillies could go 7-0, the Mets could go 0-7. But that doesn't – the other thing I think you got to keep in mind, and Atlanta's kind of struggled and Washington's kind of scuffling, but they're right there with the Phillies. So it's not like it's the Phillies – just having the Mets in the crosshairs. Washington and Atlanta are going to have to be contended with too. So the Phillies got to worry. You're really competing. It's basically 4 teams for one spot. It's just not 2 for 1.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right there. But the Phillies do have a shot when they come out of this break. If they can sweep the Cubs here, and they got Boston for 3, they got to get 1 in that Boston series. That would get them right around 500, and then they jump out and they basically have 4 with the Braves, 4 with the Nationals. They play the Pirates in there, then 4 with the Nationals again. So they're going to have division games. They're going to have a shot to do something here. But I'd look. To me, this team is in no man's land. That's their issue. They're in no man's land. All these people texting, trade Segura. That you're not fixing your problems. You're just clearing a guy out, fine. But don't think that you're going to get somebody that's going to help the organization get better because you traded a player who's having an all-star caliber season. That's not how baseball trades work.
Right. You're not fixing the problems that you have by trading Segura or McCutchen. What you will be doing, and if you want to do this, fine, is maintaining the status quo. Like I said, hope Bryce Harper gets hot the second half of the year. Hope as a team you can catch lightning in a bottle. Maybe the Mets falter. Boom, you're in the postseason. But 2 questions there. Does anybody think if they get to the postseason, what are they doing in the postseason? How far are they going to go? And what changes next year? If they make the playoffs, are they a team that's put themselves in position to make a playoff run 3-4 years in a row?
I will say this, Mike, if they get into a playoff with Wheeler, Nola, and Eflin, they do have a little bit, because the starting pitching is much more important. That if they can get a bullpen piece, now their bullpen's still a disaster. They need 3 bullpen pieces. But if they have those 3 starting pitchers, and I'm saying if they were able to somehow get a closer to help this team out, then with those 3 starting pitchers, you're at least interesting in a playoff series.
Yeah, you're interesting. But one thing I would say is check out how, and this is the other thing that kind of I'd be arguing against myself here if I'm trying to deal him. But, Nola's stats the past, check out his last 5 or 6 starts. Of course, he had that start up at Citi Field where he struck out 10 in a row and tied Seaver's record. But other than that, he struggled, and he struggled a little bit last night.
Oh, he did.
5 out of his last 6 starts, he struggled. Eflin hasn't been great, but I still think those guys have some value. So it's really been to me, and look, I'm not saying they got to go in and strip it down and become, the Kansas City Royals or the Pittsburgh Pirates and go off wandering in the desert for 5 years to try to rebuild. I think I would, if I was them, I'd think about breaking up the core and trading some guys in hopes that you could reload quickly and maybe take a step backwards in 2022, but come back in 2023 ready to compete and and be able to sustain that sort of contention for a couple of seasons.
Yeah, and by the way, McCutchen, his deal is up after this year. So, you could try to just move him out. The problem becomes, all right, do we want to try to make the playoffs or not? Okay, they probably do. And if they don't, okay, McCutchen's gone, his money's off the books. They might rather go that route than just giving McCutchen up for a single-A guy.
Well, and that gives me, that points to the argument of kind of breaking it up, right? Because now you got to go find a left fielder, right? So suppose you would say Michael Conforto having an off season this year for the Mets, but he's a free agent. Suppose you go out and sign Michael Conforto for $25 million a year and you put him in left field. Does anybody think, does that make you a playoff team? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so. So it's almost like the problems can't be solved. The left field problem, the center field problem. Who's playing? The guy at third base can't field a ground ball. The guy at first base is a defensive issue also. These are big problems that have to be solved. And, you're not going to solve them just by trying to bring in free agents and things like that. I think you have to think about breaking up the core of the team to, again, try to take a step forward.
Mike McGarry's must-win column appears Fridays in the Press of Atlantic City. AC Press McGarry on Twitter. And the Phillies and the Cubs finish up tonight and tomorrow. And then they'll play Boston before they go into the All-Star break. All right, Mike.
And have them show me something against Boston. The Cubs are reeling and getting ready to trade everybody. Go into Boston and take 2 out of 3, and then maybe we'll take this thing a little serious.
You got Jake Pavetta's in the rotation there. They'll face him in the second game of that series. All right, Mike, we'll talk to you Friday, pal.
All right, we'll see you later. Thanks.
All right, Mike McGarry's right. I said it the other day. You got to sweep this Cubs series, and then you got to try to figure out at least a way to get a game there, get yourself to 500, and then we'll start talking about after the All-Star break the trade deadline and how it can help this team out.